Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to be a no again on this, not because I don't think it has merit. I think there's a lot to it, but I think it goes back to the original bill. I think it was 217 that created a database. And I think that creation of a database should, and the problems that have been created with that creation of a database should be considered. And what I worry about is, I get that this was the importance of this merits it being rushed, but if we rush it again and we create another problem that was created in 217, and I appreciate I do appreciate the sponsors, owning up to that. But if we have rushed legislation, we could create another problem that creates a bigger problem. So I think it's instructional with these laws that we create out of here is that so often, and I've even heard it said, well, I hope that wouldn't happen, but if it can be weaponized against you, it will be weaponized against you. And I think this is a good demonstration of that. It's also notable that these problems happened within a governmental institution that had supposedly all of the safeguards. And we keep looking to government institutions to take care of us, to be the nanny of the nanny state. So I think we need to step back and we need to go, okay, well, let's look at how much power we give. And then I have the conflict. I won't get into that part. It just we're looking at safe spaces. We're told not to make safe spaces. Males are physically stronger than females, and so we're supposed to be protecting. We're supposed to be saying that there's not a difference. We just have a level of lunacy in how we're dealing with this. So it seems like we're condemned to an emergency session. So hopefully this can come back for that, or even be fixed today with a substantive change. But my real issue with this is with the database. Well, there's some things in this 24-31-906. It does add, and it says, shall not, if you just read through it, due to the strong public policy interest protected by prohibiting retaliation against whistleblowers, that doesn't really add anything. A peace officer's employer or the employee's agent shall not discharge, discriminate, harass, suspend, create a hostile work environment, subject, coercive action, reprimand, poorly evaluate, lay off, reduce hours, etc. And I think all those fall under the original categories. And I do worry that sometimes when we try to create more specificity, you end up creating loopholes. So where you have when you have a broad category, it often covers a lot more things. When you get into specifying specifics, when you specify specifics. But now getting to the real issue I have is on page 3. A peace officer who was subject to retaliation may use evidence of the retaliation in order to appeal or remediate any adverse employment action described in subsection of this section if a peace officer proves by a preponderance of evidence that the peace officer was retaliated against in a violation of subsection 1 of this section. The peace officer's employing agency shall remediate the adverse action. All right, so here's my issue. And the sponsor brought it up yesterday, or maybe I just read into it, is that these victims, and I don't think there's any question, I haven't heard any, I don't think there's any question whatsoever on any of the people that brought these forward, that they were victims, were added to a list without due process. So the problem is with the original list, the original law from 2017, or 217 from a couple years ago, that individuals were able to be deprived of life, liberty, or life, liberty, pursuit of happiness without due process. And that was done by putting them on a list. Now, I think this is also instructive because, you look at things like the Brady list, and you look at some of the red flag lists, that are created here, and we just rush. You rush into these things and just think it's going to solve everything, but you don't look at the ramifications of depriving somebody. Because now what we've done by that bill 217 a few years ago is we've created an older form of justice where you're guilty until you're proven innocent. Our system of government is that you are innocent until proven guilty. Now, we know that will lead to guilty people going free. And our general feeling around that is it's better for a number of guilty to go free than for any innocent to be imprisoned unjustly. This system that is set up in here is that it is better to imprison, to deprive a large number of people instead of that innocent people would be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, rather than the potential that any guilty would go free. And that is the opposite of our form of justice. So waiting yesterday, basically to see if that would be fixed with this amendment and then the other amendment, and I don't think it is, because right now it still says a peace officer who is subject to retaliation. Well, now the victim, instead of being not placed on the list, has already been placed on the list. So in this scenario, the victim has already been placed on this list and deprived of life, liberty, or property. Now, that victim has to fight his or her way out of this hole, this conviction, this deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, has to fight their way out of this hole by regarding any adverse employment action. So you would have to be first proven that it's an adverse employment action described in this section. If a peace officer proves by a preponderance of evidence, wow. Now instead of a preponderance of evidence, and I get those confused, preponderance of evidence, beyond a shadow of a doubt. I think a preponderance of evidence is just about 51%. So instead of having been proven that they should go on this list, they have to present a preponderance of evidence to get off this list. And I think the difference is really important, because it was zero evidence to go on the list, and the victim who has been subject to all of these harassment issues, whether it's suspended, created a hostile work environment, subject to a corrective action or employment, poor evaluation, laid off, reduced work hours, adversely affected future employment opportunities. So with all of that against them, maybe that employee was laid off. Well, how do you go in and prove by a preponderance of evidence that all of these things happened? You're forcing the victim. This is forcing the victim to fight their way out of a hole. Now, this certainly would protect somebody who's guilty as well, and it would create the inconvenience of having to deprive that individual, guilty or innocent, of life, liberty, or property. It would create that requirement to do so only via due process of the law, but it would protect the victim in this case from having to fight out of a hole. So there was a lot said yesterday that if you don't support this bill, you're for this, you're for that. And what I'm for is protecting the victim from getting put in this category in the first place. So it's not against victims' rights. I have absolutely no desire to support a good old boys network. Our purpose in here, the role of government, is to secure the rights. We are to secure the rights of the individuals we are to secure the rights among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness, of course, was considered property at first, but under English law, changed to pursuit of happiness so as not to be seen as supporting slavery, so we wanted to get away from that. So, but that's the pursuit of happiness, their own individual good. So the pursuit of their own individual good, their life, their liberty, which could be taken in retaliation.
Representative DeGraff, your time has expired. My apologies.